Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. And thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you tuning in.
We do. And if you enjoy these explorations, please do hit that like button and, share it around. It really helps.
Definitely. Today, we're diving into something many of you asked for, the story behind a really significant aircraft. We're going to trace its history from the very beginning right up to, well, where things stand now.
That's right. We're talking about the MiG MiG-29, the Fulcrum. And we've pulled together quite a bit of material for this.
Yeah, we have. We've got the Digital Combat Simulator Flight Manual, which is surprisingly detailed, actually.
Oh, yeah. Those DCS manuals are often gold mines.
We've also got the Wikipedia entry, of course, articles from Flight Global and Military Aviation, and even a Reddit discussion that gave some interesting historical context.
So our plan really is to weave all that together. We want to look at the design thinking behind it, the key tech that went into it, and its overall place in aviation history. Sort of a comprehensive, but hopefully engaging overview.
Sounds good. So where does the story start? Back in the 60s, it seems.
Yeah, the initial thinking, the need for a new kind of lightweight frontline fighter started bubbling up in the Soviet Union around then.
But the real catalyst came later.
It looks like 1969 was the key year. That's when the Soviets got wind of the U.S. Air Force's FX program.
Ah, the program that led to the F-15 Eagle.
Exactly. And the Soviet leadership looked at this upcoming American fighter and, well, they realized their existing planes might be seriously outmatched.
Their mainstays at the time were the MiG-21 and MiG-23, right?
Correct. The MiG-21, the fishbed, was, a capable aircraft for its era, but it lacked range, couldn't carry a huge variety of weapons, and didn't have much room left for future upgrades.
And the MiG-23 Flogger.
Faster, yes, carried more fuel, but it just wasn't maneuverable enough, especially compared to the projected capabilities of the F-15. The Soviets saw the Eagle as a real step up.
So this realization prompted a direct response.
It did. In 1969, the Soviet General Staff issued a requirement for something called the Perspective Knee Frontovoy Istravatl, or PFI.
Which translates to Advanced Frontline Fighter. Sounds ambitious.
Oh, it was! The specs were demanding. They wanted long range, but also the ability to operate from rough, short airfields.
Sort of contradictory goals, almost.
Very much so. Plus, they wanted excellent agility, speed over Mach 2, and a heavy weapons load. It was a tall order.
And figure out how to actually make that fly.
They brought in the big guns. The Russian Aerodynamics Institute, TSAGI, worked closely with the Sukhoi Design Bureau on the basic aerodynamic shape for this PFI concept.
But things didn't quite go straight from PFI to a single aircraft, did they? There was a fork in the road.
That's right. In the early 70s, the Mikoyan Design Bureau, the OKB, suggested, basically copying the American approach.
Meaning?
Meaning developing both a heavy long-range fighter and a lighter, more agile counterpart, like the U.S. was doing with the F-15 and what would become the F-16.
And that argument won out.
It did. The Soviet Air Force agreed. So in 1972, they issued a new requirement. Logii Frontovoy Istravatl, or LFI.
Lightweight frontline fighter.
Precisely. So the original PFI program effectively split. Mikoyan took their initial PFI ideas and proposed a smaller, lighter version for the LFI requirement. This became the MiG-29D. The D stood for doubler, meaning double or secondary.
And Sukhoi.
Sukhoi took their PFI work, the T-10 design, and aimed it at the heavy fighter requirement, the Tiazoli Frontovoy Istravatl. And that, of course, evolved into the Su-27 flanker.
Fascinating. So the MiG-29 was deliberately conceived as the lighter partner to the Su-27, much like the F-16 and F-15 relationship.
That's a very good analogy. The main goal for this LFI, the future MiG-29, was to create something that could really go toe-to-toe with those new American fighters, the F-15, F-16, even the YF-17 prototype that became the F-A-18.
Primarily for air combat over the battlefield.
Yes, air superiority was the key role, with a secondary job of daytime ground attack, but only using unguided weapons and only in good weather. Very much focused on the air-to-air fight.
Okay, so the strategy is set, the requirements are defined. Mid to late 70s, that's when they really started cutting metal.
Exactly. The detailed design work on what would become the MiG-29 officially kicked off in 1974, turning concepts into actual blueprints.
And the first prototype, our sources mention the Zenith factory built it.
Correct. This first experimental aircraft, known internally as Izdeli 9, or just 9, was crucial for proving the design worked aerodynamically.
And then the big day, first flight. October 6th, or maybe the 10th, 1977, with Alexander Fedotov flying it.
Yeah, sources differ slightly on the exact date, but Fedotov was the pilot, a huge milestone, always fraught with, a bit of tension.
Understandable. And after that first flight,
The Moscow Aviation Production Association built 2 more test aircraft. This let them really expand the flight envelope testing, gather data on handling, performance, all that crucial stuff.
then, summer of 77, the first plane specifically for the state acceptance trials was ready.
Right. These state trials are the really demanding government tests. Does it meet spec? Is it safe? Can it do the job it was designed for? It's a major hurdle.
Moving into the early 80s, it wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were challenges before it could really enter service.
No, definitely not. A really critical and frankly dangerous phase started in 1982, spin testing.
Purposefully putting the plane into a spin.
Yep. To see how it behaves, how controllable it is when things go wrong, and crucially, how to recover. The fact that MiG-29 handled these tests successfully was a really good sign for the basic design.
We also saw that the first one with the full avionics suite, the 902, flew in late 78, but without its radar initially.
That's interesting, isn't it? It shows the step-by-step process. Even without the main radar, the RLPK-29, they used that airframe to test other key systems.
Like the new missiles, K-62M, K-2017.
Exactly, those infrared missiles. And also the EOS-NS-29, the electro-optical sighting and navigational system.
Which sounds pretty complex for the time. Electro-optical targeting, inertial nav, fire control, that helmet-mounted sight.
Oh yeah, the Social 3UM helmet sight was pretty advanced. Plus a mission computer, the C-100, integrated displays. It was a sophisticated package.
But getting it into full production took a bit longer. There were setbacks.
There were. Sadly, 2 of the prototypes were lost in flight accidents. That kind of thing isn't uncommon in developing cutting-edge fighters, but it definitely caused delays.
But finally, in 1982, serial production began at the Moscow plant, Znamya Truda.
Banner of labor, yeah. A huge step. And the first production MiG-29 started showing up at the Kubinka Air Base in August 1983.
And after passing all those state tests in 1984, the way was clear for wider deployment.
Pretty much. Deliveries to the frontline units really ramped up after that.
The first units getting them were the 234th Regiment at Kubinka and the 145th FAR, reaching operational readiness in early 85.
That's what the sources indicate. That's when it really transitioned from a development project to an active combat aircraft in the Soviet Air Forces.
And as it entered service, that planned split and rolls with the Su-27 became clearer.
It's very clear. The Su-27, the flanker, with its much longer range, was tasked with the deeper missions intercepting NATO strike aircraft, controlling airspace further out.
While the MiG-29,
The MiG-29 took over from the older MiG-23s in the frontline regiments. Its job was air superiority closer to the battle area, tactical air combat, protecting ground forces, a distinct division of labor.
Okay, so it's in service. Let's dig into the actual design. It's described as having an integral aerodynamic scheme. What does that mean in practice?
Basically, the wing and the fuselage aren't really distinct parts. They blend together smoothly to form a single lifting surface. Think of it like the whole aircraft body is helping generate lift, not just the wings. It reduces drag, increases lift, makes it more efficient.
And the materials used reflect that sophistication. Aluminum, titanium, composites.
Right. A mix chosen for strength, weight, and heat resistance where needed. Aluminum alloys form the basic structure, titanium in high-stress, high-heat areas like around the engines, some steel for critical load-bearing parts, and composites to save weight, especially in things like control surfaces or panels.
The fuselage itself, semi-monocoque. Break that down for us.
Okay, think of the outer skin of the aircraft carrying a lot of the load, but it's reinforced internally by frames running crosswise and stringers running lengthwise. It's a very common, very efficient way to build strong but relatively light aircraft structures.
And the layout. Radar in the nose, obviously.
Yeah, radar antenna and the pressurized avionics bay up front. Then the cockpit, also pressurized. Interestingly, it's tilted slightly downwards.
They're better visibility.
Exactly. Better view forward and down, which is crucial for spotting things on the ground or below you in a dogfight.
And that little transparent dome in front of the canopy.
Ah, yes, that's for the OEPS-29, the electro-optical system. Specifically, it houses the IRST, the infrared search and track sensor. Lets a pilot look for heat signatures passively.
Stealthy targeting.
In a way, yes. Doesn't
Yeah.
give away your position like radar does. Then you've got fuel tanks distributed through the fuselage, engines behind those, and the tail section mounting the vertical fins, afterburners, and air brakes. And right at the back, the dry chute container.
A really distinctive feature are those leading-edge extensions, the LEXs, that blend into the fuselage.
Very distinctive. Those aren't just for looks. At high angles of attack, like when you're pulling hard in a turn, Those sharp edges generate powerful swirling vortices of air.
And those vortices.
They flow back over the wing and basically stick the airflow to the wing surface, generating a lot of extra lift and improving control when you're maneuvering aggressively. The engine air intakes are cleverly built into the underside of these LEXs too.
The wing itself sounds fairly standard for a fighter. Swept edges, flapped ailerons.
It's a proven layout, yes. Swept leading and trailing edges. It has leading edge flaps that deploy automatically at high angles of attack for even more lift, then standard trailing edge flaps and ailerons for roll control.
And the tail surfaces.
Fully movable horizontal stabilators for pitch control, and they move differentially to help with roll. The twin vertical fins provide directional stability.
Mounted on booms outboard of the engines.
Oh.
And apparently, the tail design changed a bit over time.
It did. Early models had slightly smaller vertical fins and also these ventral fins underneath the tail booms.
Extra stability.
Presumably. But later versions got rid of the ventral fins and had larger vertical rudders, likely for better control authority, especially at high speeds or high angles of attack.
And the landing gear designed for rough fields you mentioned.
Absolutely. That was a key requirement operating from less than perfect runways. It's a standard tricycle layout, but robust. The nose gear has brakes and a mudguard. The main wheels retract forward, rotating 90 degrees to tuck into bays just above the intakes.
Which brings us to those intakes. They have a special feature for rough field operations, right?
A very clever one. Because the main intakes are mounted low, they're vulnerable to sucking up rocks, dirt, FOD, foreign object debris on the ground.
Which is bad news for a jet engine.
Very bad news. So the MiG-29 has doors that can close off the main intakes completely when it's on the ground or taxiing.
So where does the air come from then?
Through louvers, like vents, on the top surface of the wing roots right above the main intakes. Air gets drawn in there instead. Remarkably, it can even fly like that, with the main intakes closed, up to about 800 kilometers per hour. Big advantage for dispersed operations.
Clever. Let's switch gears to the cockpit, the avionics and flight controls. Obviously, these have evolved, but the manual mentions a simplified game avionics mode.
Ah, yeah. That's mostly a feature in flight simulators like DCS. It's designed to make things less overwhelming for new virtual pilots. It just shows the absolute basics on the display mode, speed, altitude, heading, maybe some radar info, without all the complexity of the real system.
But the real cockpit is packed with instruments.
Oh, absolutely. You've got your standard airspeed indicator, altimeters, both pressure and radar mechanical indicators for gear, flaps, air brake position, then critical flight info like angle of attack, G-meter, the ADI for attitude, HSI for navigation.
Plus engine instruments, fuel gauges.
Tachometers, turbine temperatures, fuel quantity, yeah. And the head-down display, or HDD, which is where a lot of the sensor and weapon system information appears.
And keeping track of threats, the radar warning system, RWR.
Essential piece of kit. It listens for enemy radar signals, alerts the pilot, gives a rough direction, and often identifies the type of radar painting them. Early warning is critical.
There's also a trim mechanism mentioned. What's that for?
It lets the pilot make fine adjustments to the control surface's pitch, roll, yaw to basically cancel out any constant pressure needed on the stick or rudder. If the plane wants to naturally climb or roll slightly, you trim it out so it flies hands off. Reduces workload, especially on longer flights. Light show when trim is neutral.
And to help the pilot manage the aircraft, there's an automatic flight control system, the AFCS.
Right, the SAU 451. It offers several modes. A basic damper mode smooths out bumps and minor oscillations. Then attitude hold lets you lock in a specific pitch and roll angle. Altitude hold maintains a set barometric altitude.
And collision avoidance.
Yeah, there's a ground collision avoidance function too, which can automatically pull the aircraft up if it gets too close to the terrain based on the radar altimeter. And there's a reset button to quickly disengage the autopilot modes.
In navigation, the head-up display, the HUD, sounds key.
Definitely. It projects key flight info speed, altitude, heading, navigation cues onto a transparent screen in the pilot's forward view, so you don't have to look down into the cockpit as much. It has submodes for following a flight plan route, returning to base, or making an instrument landing.
Okay, let's talk combat modes. Air-to-air, scan, track while scan, single target track.
Standard radar modes, really. Scan is your basic search mode, sweeping the radar to find targets. Track while scan, or TWS, is more advanced. It lets the radar keep tracking multiple targets it's already found while still scanning for new ones. Very useful for situational awareness.
And single target track.
STT. Once you decide which target to engage, you lock it up in STT. The radar focuses all its energy on that one target, giving you precise tracking data needed for a missile shot.
And besides radar, there's the IRST.
The infrared search and track. Passive detection using heat signatures. Good for sneaking up on someone or finding targets when radar might be jammed or you don't want to transmit.
Plus a bore mode and that helmet mode using the helmet-mounted sight.
Right. Bore mode typically slaves the IRST sensor straight ahead along the aircraft's bore sight line for quick acquisition. And the helmet mode is huge for close-in combat. The pilot just looks at the target, and the sensors and missile seekers follow their head movement.
Letting you shoot at targets way off to the side.
Exactly. Combined with a highly agile missile like the R-73, it's a massive advantage in a dogfight. High off-bore sight capability, they call it.
Speaking of missiles, let's talk weaponry. Air-to-air carries things like the R-27ER and that famous R-73.
Yep. The R-27ER is a medium-range missile, uses semi-active radar homing, meaning the MiG has to keep its radar locked onto the target until the missile hits.
And the R-73, the Archer?
That's the star for close combat. Short-range, infrared homing, incredibly agile. It has all-aspect capability, meaning it can lock onto a target from the front, side, or rear, not just the hot engine exhaust. It was developed by Vimpel specifically for these newer Soviet fighters.
And its agility comes partly from those gas dynamic control vanes.
That's a key feature.
Yeah.
Little thrusters near the nose that help steer the missile, especially at high angles of attack where traditional fins lose effectiveness. Combined with an advanced seeker head, the Mach, which was better at acquiring targets and resisting countermeasures like flares.
So a very lethal short-range missile for its time.
Absolutely. It really pushed the boundaries of dogfight missile technology when it came out in the mid-'80s.
Now, while it's mainly an air superiority fighter, early MiG-29s had a secondary ground attack role using unguided weapons.
That's right. Primarily the earlier variants. They could carry standard dumb bombs, FAB-100s, 250s, 500s, even the big FAB-1500. Also concrete piercing bombs, cluster bombs, submunition dispensers, and unguided rockets like the S-8.
Accuracy must have been a challenge with those.
Very much so. Free-fall bombs just follow gravity, so hitting anything specific requires precise release timing based on speed, altitude, dive angle. The manual mentions using CCRP, continuously calculated release point bombing modes, especially for high-drag bombs, to improve accuracy somewhat.
And the rockets.
Usually fired in salvos, just ripple firing a bunch of them towards an area target. Good for suppressing defenses or hitting soft targets, but not pinpoint precision.
Looking at its service life, the MiG-29 has seen action in quite a few places. Syria, for instance.
Yes, Syrian MiG-29s became involved later in the Civil War, around late 2013, and Ukrainian MiG-29s have actually flown joint exercises with NATO aircraft, even U.S. strategic bombers like the B-1 and B-52, which is interesting.
And, of course, heavily used in the 2022 conflict in Ukraine.
Sadly, yes. Used by both sides in air combat roles, and other operators, too. The Royal Malaysian Air Force flew them for over 20 years, from 95 to 2017.
And development hasn't stopped. RSK MiG has looked at adding thrust vector control.
They have. They experimented with all-aspect thrust vectoring nozzles that can direct the engine exhaust on the MiG-29 OVT demonstrator. It's been explored as an option for the more advanced MiG-29 MM2 models.
What's the advantage of TVC?
Potentially huge gains in maneuverability. Super agility, enhanced control at very low speeds or high angles of attack, maybe even the ability to physically dodge incoming missiles with extreme maneuvers. It really pushes the flight envelope.
So wrapping up, the MiG-29 story is really one of responding to a perceived threat, pushing technology, and then continually evolving over decades.
Absolutely. From that initial PFI requirement driven by the F-15 through its development challenges, its specific role alongside the Su-27, and now these potential future upgrades like TVC. It's been a long and significant journey. It remains a key player.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of how the Fulcrum came to be and how it developed. There's always more detail, of course, specific battles, system nuances.
But hopefully this gives a good overview. It's a testament to that constant cycle in aviation. Design, test, adapt, improve, always driven by threats and new possibilities. So thinking about it, what part of its evolution strikes you as most interesting or maybe unexpected?
Yeah, what questions does it leave you with? It really shows that in military aviation, the work is never truly done. There's always another challenge, another innovation just over the horizon.
A fascinating process to watch.
It really is. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.